Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sailing with the Jameses. We've got an extra exciting episode for you this week. Sam's been looking forward to this moment for ages. We're diving into a big project, installing new electronics. We've been eagerly anticipating having working electronics on board, especially Sam. While we're neck deep in cupboards and contorting and twisting ourselves into all sorts of awkward positions in tight spaces, our freshwater bladder has chosen this moment to completely give way. And now we realize we only have 4 days to complete this project. Hi, we're the James family.
Are you sick of your day-to-day life? Ever thought about doing something different?
Well, we did just that.
We bought an unfinished aluminium catamaran and we're fixing her up as we sail around the world.
Come along for the journey and click subscribe.
Daddy? Mommy? Charlie? James.
For those of you that have been following along, you'll know that we replaced our Starlink recently. And what I did is I temporarily set it up. We've had the cyclone go over, we've had heaps of cloud cover, and that Starlink has been working absolutely perfectly. It hasn't been missing a beat. We're really happy with it. So I've decided over the next few days I'm going to install it properly and plumb all the wires in. And I figured while I'm doing that, why don't I install our new AIS and aerials that go with it? And then I thought, well, while I'm down there running those wires through the engine room, why don't I install battery chargers in the engine room as well? So let me explain what we're up to. The job got bigger and bigger and bigger. Essentially, what we've decided to do, we need to get AIS, an automatic identification system, for Indonesia, which is the next country we're heading to. What I opted to do was go for a combined VHF AIS unit, and then I've bought a splitter unit to go with it. And what the splitter unit does is it allows us to use one aerial for both AIS and VHF. Now, I'm not an advocate for B&G. When I was looking at all the different brands, I found them to be much of a muchness. This one here I got just slightly cheaper than the other brands, and that's why I've gone this way. For me, it's more value for money. I was comparing the different brands and the different packages, and they call the same things by different names and have different marketing, and some are a little bit better here and a little bit better there, but I found them all to be fairly broad. So we've just gone with this one because I could get this one a little bit cheaper than the other ones. What we have gone with is an external aerial load, GPS aerial. And the reason we went with an external aerial is because, I don't know if you've been noticing, but with the iPad, sometimes it works fantastic, and other times we've been getting a little bit of disrupted signal underneath the roof here. So this will make sure that we get a nice GPS signal for our AIS going through the radar and then going through the splitter. I'll be mounting this with the cabling that we have here, and I'll explain when we mount it, why I'm mounting it there, and why I've chosen to do things the way I have. Now, the reason we're going for battery chargers is we did a big refit up in Cairns and we really expanded our solar. And what we used to have is a 2 kVA genset that we used to run fairly regularly, especially when we wanted hot showers. But since we've put all the solar on, we have had heaps and heaps of power. So now that genset coming was an asset that we used all the time. Now it's a bit of a pain in the tush, because every month I get it up and give it a run, making sure it works okay, and then put it back away again. So I've decided to get rid of it. But if we're going to get rid of it, then we need something else. And what I've opted for is a couple of DC to DC battery chargers that'll go from our engine start banks to our lithium house bank. And the reason that I needed something here is with lithium batteries, if the worst case scenario happens and they go completely dead, you need to get some charge into them to bring them back to life again for the battery charger to work on the on our inverter or something like that. So this way I can use these. So they're not going to be used all the time. They're going to have very basic single pole isolators on them. So just when I want to use them, I can flick them on and have a potential 40 amps going into the battery, or flick them off. I imagine they're going to be off most of the time, and they're going to be a just in case thing down there in the engine room. But we'll run that. We've got some cable here. We'll run it. I'll show you how I'm going to wire it all in and how it's all going to end up. It looks like there's a bit of a storm coming, so day one of the install is pretty much up. What we've done so far is we've mounted a fishing rod holder here. I've put some rubber around it to stop the dissimilar metal and isolate it from the aluminium, because the hose clamps I've used is stainless. What I've also done is I've put a bit of rubber around the shaft of the Starlink dish so it doesn't rattle around and it's a very snug fit, and then put the wires out the bottom. Now there's some awesome hacks on YouTube of how you can drill into the back of these. You can disconnect the wires of the motor so it stays nice and flat. Well, I think Elon is a fan of YouTube as well, because what they've done is there's actually a thing on the app. And so you can go on the app and just ask your dish to be flat, and it nicely obliges. The only thing I've done is I've pivoted this here to make the dish perfectly flat for all the different angles, hoping that it won't get too much shadowing from this wind generator here. The next thing I did is I've modified the base of this GPS antenna, just that way I can put it mounted up on the actual piping, and I've just sort of cut it so that it fits round with the pipe, and then put a hose clamp in through there. And then at the back we've got isolating rubber. That is where I've put the VHF aerial. Now that aerial there isn't going to be for the main radio which we're installing outside. I'm actually going to swap it and put it for the indoor radio. The reason being, the only time we use the indoor radio is if one of us is out a long way in the tender and takes our handheld VHF. It doesn't have great range anyway, and we've got the other one right up the mast. The reason I didn't put the second aerial right up the mast is there's certain spacings they need to be, or they start getting interference from each other. And also, so I wanted to keep the way that one's mounted and not have to make all new mounts. And the other reason is if the worst case scenario happens and we happen to lose our rig, we have another means of communication across the back here with another VHF aerial. I've got options. I've got plenty of cabling stored down in the back lazarette here. I can move it, I can mount it somewhere else, anything like that. So we are going to be swapping the aerials around. But this is day one. I've just basically put the cables here. I'll have to put them in. The next step is to start cutting holes in the boat. That's the scary bit. So I've got to decide exactly where the holes are going to do, and we'll start running all the wires. Now that we've run the cables in through the boat and drilled all the holes, the next step is, this here is the existing VHF on board, and that has the aerial at the top of the mast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this faceplate off, and I'll take the aerial out of that. I'll put the plug for the aerial that we've just installed on the back of the boat into this one, and put the other one into the splitter, which is going to go to the unit we're going to mount outdoors a little bit later. While I have this covered off, what we're also going to do is we're going to put our Starlink modem in behind here, just out of the way. And what we did was, when we bought Starlink, we bought an individual inverter. Rather than running the big boat inverter, we got a smaller one that we could have on all the time. And we did this for a couple of main reasons. One main reason, and the biggest main reason, is efficiency. So an inverter, generally speaking, doesn't start reaching its peak efficiencies unless it has 30% load. And on our big massive inverter, there's no way we'd be getting anywhere near to efficiency levels. We also didn't want to run that one all the time, and we push the limits of our big inverter when we're cooking, and especially if we've got 2 induction cooktops on. So we needed to be able to calculate the power for the other things. So we had the inverter here dedicated to it. We had a 150 watt inverter, and what that means is that kept us up around the 30%. And the way it did that is, on average, our Starlink seems to use around about 40 watts of power. Then what's happened though, and one thing that's changed, is our old editing computer used 44 watts of power. We've since upgraded our computer and we've got a gaming computer. Myself and Kate haven't had gaming computers before. It's just meant to be a lot better for editing. But one thing that's changed is that it uses 300 watts of power, which is considerably more. It's very, very power hungry, and it meant we couldn't run it on the little inverter that we have in here. So we got that one off eBay very, very cheap. It was only 50 Australian dollars. But what we've had to do, because we're going a lot bigger inverter, but the inverter isn't always going to be near that range of 30%, we've had to go for a little bit more expensive. Generally speaking, I'll always go a cheaper option. If it's going to work just as good, it's good enough for me. But here, because we've gone a 500 watt inverter, so that we can easily run the gaming computer or our new editing computer, the screen, which actually doesn't use much at all, it averages only 2 watts of power, and then the Starlink, which is only using about 44 watts to 50 watts, it keeps it well within the range of all of those there, and it'll be a lot more efficient at the lower power levels. It'll also be a little bit cooler in here. The other small inverter had a fairly large fan in it, and because it was running around its peaks at some times, it was a little bit noisy in behind here. So this new inverter we're about to install will hopefully make it a heck of a lot quieter. But we'll get to it. We'll take this cupboard off.
End of the day.
So yeah, the next step is we've got a VE Smart Connect. We'll put that in the end of the inverter. We didn't buy one for this inverter. We had an old school solar controller, and to make it go with the mobile app and link up with the other ones when we upgraded the solar, there was one there. So I'll just pinch it from there so I can configure this one, just so I can set the alarms and that. With our lithium, our solar charges it up to 14.2 volts. The problem with our last inverter was it alarmed at 14 volts because it was built in the times before lithium and wasn't quite ready. So we'll just check all the internal settings on this, make sure we're happy, then we'll take the dongle back out and put it back into our solar controller so we can manage it. But it's well and truly dark. It was kind of dark when we started this last little step. So this is us for today, and tomorrow we'll go outside and we'll start drilling the holes there and installing the units on the outside so we can start wiring them up. Yeah, new electronics. Yeah.
As lightning and rainstorms pour down outside the boat, we certainly didn't expect a downpour of fresh water inside the boat as well. But one of our bladders has decided to completely fail, giving us only a couple days to complete the install and depart here to get it fixed.
Now, I know at the beginning of this video, I mentioned the aerials, battery chargers and AIS to get fitted. But what happened is the project evolved. And as we're cutting a hole in the dash, well, we figured we're going to have extra equipment that we're going to be fitting as well. One of them is our Vulcan Chartplotter, and that's going to come with a radar, wind instruments, and a new autopilot wired through. So I was going to install all of them together, but what's happened is we've developed a hole in one of our bladders, one of our freshwater tanks. So we're going to need to go into a marina, which I was actually trying to avoid in order to fix it. And I'm much more comfortable going up the rig and fitting the new radar wind instruments when we are in a nice calm marina. So we're going to put this part of the installation, which I brought into it, which was never part of the plan, back out of the plan. And we're just going to finalize the B&G instruments. Before I plug the hole in the dash though, we are going to run an extra wire. We currently have an esky or an extra fridge underneath the seat here, which is great for our long range cruising because it's an extra freezer and another source of redundancy. And we run that through our 12-volt plugs, which are located here, and we plug them in. But what we've found is because we've got quite a few cameras and bits and pieces, and they all need USB charging, all run through our 12-volt outlets, they're all only drawing about 2 amps, but it ends up being quite a bit. And as the fridge draws 7 amps by itself, we're going to make that on a dedicated circuit. So I'll run an extra wire coming out here with its own breaker inside the switchboard, coming through and going to the fridge. We don't use the fridge all the time. We can last for a month quite comfortably with the fridge inside. And once we go longer than that, that's when we stock up on this one here. What I'm also going to do, when I bought the Vulcan, it's got a thing called screen mirroring. And on the brochures and that, it said that you can control the main screen from the extra remote devices. So what my plan was, is instead of paying for the big 12-inch screen, we'd get a smaller one which is still functional. It's a lot cheaper, and then buy a nice big tablet or iPad and have it remotely that way. It also saves us buying the remote for the autopilot. This has autopilot functionality, and that way we can control that way, and I can stand up on the roof and see where we're going when we're going in and out of reefs or up forward. Because that's not actually the case now, I've read the manual, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another dedicated wire coming out of here, and that's going to go to a 3-way switch, and I'll wire that directly into the autopilot. And what that gives me the ability to do is I can stand up on the roof and still steer as we're going in and out of nice tight spots. So with the head out of the hole, I get quite good vision, but not perfect vision. It'll be a lot better standing up on the roof. So that's going to be the plan. I'll run the 2 extra wires out of here. We'll plug the hole, and we have to go to a marina shortly, so I better get cracking. I'll go down there and we'll fit those battery chargers in the engine room, and then we'll get ready to head on off. So this install is pretty simple and straightforward. Generally speaking, the thing that I found the most challenging is running all the wires. That takes a considerable amount of time and is fairly tricky. But essentially what we want to do is fit the DC to DC charger somewhere here. And the reason we're doing it, again, is to wake up our lithium battery. So if at night the worst case happens and everything goes dark, we need a way to force power into those batteries to wake them up. Once that wakes up, then that'll wake up our charger inverter, and we can have more options from there. It also does allow, if we have a lot of bad weather and we're having to do some motoring, we have the potential of 40 amps to go in there. Our main power usage is cooking, and we have the option to use gas. So if we are using a considerable amount of power, we can reduce that by using gas to cook rather than our electric. Now, the way we're going to do this is the positive has to be isolated. So we're going to have the positive coming from the battery, going through the DC-DC charger, and then heading up to our lithium bank. We're going to have a single pole isolator before it, just so it's very simple and foolproof, so it can be turned off. It does have an electronic start and stop, but we don't want these on all the time. We have plenty of solar for our usage, and we've also got the option of the 2 wind generators on the back as well. So we'll have a single pole isolator on it, and then the positive will then run from there up to our lithium bank. We are going to use a common earth though, so what that means is the same earth lead that comes off the battery is going to go in through there and then out the other side. So when you're doing that, you want to be careful that you don't create earth loops or negative loops or anything like that. So if you're going to try this kind of wiring thing, just consult an electrician first. Otherwise, the easiest way to wire these up is to have 2 wires going from the battery into the battery charger, 2 wires going out the other side and going to your positive and negative to whatever you're charging. The reason I'm using the common negative is because this boat shares a common negative. So as in, these here are already linked to our lithium negatives in the switchboard and linked to the other side with a bridging switch on the positive side, and it just saves me having to run those cables. So I'll have the negative coming off that, going to one side, coming out the other side, and then going back to the same thing. It saves me a lot of time having to run the wires. But let's get to it. Another one of the jobs that we're doing here in Hervey Bay is we are refitting the ladder to the back of the boat. Now initially what I had was I had some galvanized bolts going through here with wing nuts on the end. And the idea with that is that we would take the ladder off when we're not using it and then put it on when we are. And the truth is, we've left it on the whole time. The wing nuts have rusted that much, it was bleeding all over the deck and starting to rust here, and I had to cut them off. So one of the jobs we're going to do is we're going to put some stainless bolts on so we can leave the ladder out at all times. We think for safety it's a pretty good idea anyway, because that way we've always got it there. If someone does fall overboard, they can just pull it over. I've siliconed these bits of pipe on so it shouldn't mark the paint anymore, and should be there ready to go. So come with me, hopefully we won't drop these in the water, they're quite expensive. We'll put the ladder on permanently, probably, fingers crossed, for the last time. You can see here where the rust is bleeding down. Now what we've decided to do is when we paint these more fully, we're going to leave it bare aluminium around here just for wear and chafe, and it'll be a lot easier. It's a bit hard to keep the paint on these, so these tabs will end up being just bare aluminium. But what we're going to do is we've got a few washers because I couldn't get ones that quite had the exact size sleeve on it, and we needed the 3 washers for it to make it. Put one on this side, and we'll try and see if we can fit 2 in the middle there. It may not work. We'll do it up and hope that it spins okay.
We've got a little secret to share. The electronics install isn't the only reason we're here in this city. There's another big reason, and it's about to make its arrival very soon. Be sure to stay tuned next week to catch all the exciting changes coming. Our Patreons already know and got a sneak peek. If you want the inside scoop on things and extra videos, head on over to our Patreon page for some awesome perks. The link is down below and in the description box. A huge shout out to our amazing Patreons. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and drop us a comment below. It helps us out heaps and we would greatly appreciate it. Catch you guys next week for some exciting news. Bye everyone.